In the late 1930s, the world looked at Berlin and saw a juggernaut. The newsreels of the era displayed a Germany of shimmering glass, high-speed autobahns, and the roar of the Messerschmitt Bf 109. To a casual observer in 1937, it appeared that the Third Reich had achieved an economic miracle, seemingly eclipsing the United States, which was still limping through the tail end of the Great Depression. But beneath the polished chrome and the synchronized marching of the Wehrmacht lay a volatile financial architecture. While American streets were filled with a mass-produced Ford Model 14, German roads remained strangely quiet. Was the German miracle a legitimate economic takeover, or was it a masterclass in atmospheric propaganda designed to hide a looming bankruptcy? To understand the true wealth of these nations, we have to look past the parades and into the fuel tanks of their citizenry. The most clinical metric of pre-war wealth wasn't the number of tanks, but the number of civilian wheels on the pavement. In 1938, the United States boasted roughly 30 million registered motor vehicles, approximately one car for every 4 citizens. In contrast, Germany, despite the hype surrounding the people's car or Volkswagen, had only one car for every 47 people. This wasn't just a matter of luxury, it was a matter of industrial throughput. American factories were already optimized for the moving assembly line, a mechanical logic that allowed for the 5% tolerances required for civilian mass production. Germany's economy, however, remained a craftsman economy, where highly skilled laborers spent hundreds of hours hand-fitting parts that the Americans were stamping out by the thousands in a single afternoon. This disparity in civilian production created a hidden technical bottleneck that would soon dictate the speed of mechanized warfare. How did a supposedly poorer Germany fund its massive rearmament if it lacked the liquid capital of the Americans? The answer lies in a sophisticated shell game known as Mefo bills. Created by economist Hjalmar Schacht, these were essentially promissory notes issued by a dummy corporation. The German government used these ghost credits to pay arms manufacturers like Krupp and Rheinmetall, keeping the debt off the official books to avoid international scrutiny and runaway inflation. It was a strategy of deferred bankruptcy. By 1938, the Reich was technically insolvent. The only way to pay off the Mefo bills was to seize the gold reserves and assets of neighboring nations. Germany wasn't growing richer through trade, it was pivoting toward a plunder economy. But even stolen gold couldn't solve the Reich's most desperate technical deficiency, the chemistry of combustion. While the United States enjoyed a massive surplus of arable land and mechanized agriculture, Germany faced a calorie gap. In 1939, the average American worker consumed significantly more protein and fat than his German counterpart. The Reich was forced to implement ersatz or substitute goods, beech bark for pepper, roasted acorns for coffee, and most critically, synthetic rubber known as Buna. This reliance on synthetics wasn't a sign of superior innovation, but a desperate reaction to resource scarcity. The mechanical logic was simple. For every ton of synthetic rubber or oil produced, Germany had to divert massive amounts of coal and electricity that could have been used for steel production. It was a thermodynamic tax that the resource-rich United States never had to pay. This chemical struggle extended directly to the flight decks of the world's most advanced fighter planes. The disparity in wealth and resources was most visible in the chemistry of aviation fuel. By 1940, the US had perfected the catalytic cracking process, allowing for the mass production of 100-octane fuel. This wasn't just a number, it was a physical constraint on engine design. High-octane fuel allowed American engines, like the Pratt & Whitney R2800, to run at much higher compression ratios without knocking or engine failure. German engineers, restricted by lower-quality synthetic fuels, had to over-engineer their engines with complex fuel injection systems and methanol water injection, MW50, just to keep pace. The US could simply brute force performance through superior chemical wealth, while Germany had to invent its way out of a corner. But could engineering genius overcome a 10-to-1 disadvantage in raw steel and electricity? The true gears of war were the machine tools, the lathes and presses that make the weapons. Before the first shot was fired, the United States possessed nearly 50% of the world's high-precision machine tool capacity. This was the chain reaction of wealth. More capital led to more consumer demand, which led to a massive machine tool industry, which then pivoted to military use. When the US entered the war, they didn't just have more money, they had a higher industrial velocity. While a German factory might take 8 months to retool for a new tank variant, an American plant in Detroit could achieve the same shift in weeks due to the sheer abundance of standardized modular machinery. This velocity created a logistical nightmare for the German high command that no tactical brilliance could solve. In the popular imagination, the Wehrmacht was a fully mechanized force. The reality was startlingly different. Because Germany lacked the massive oil wealth and automotive infrastructure of the United States, 80% of the German army relied on horse-drawn transport for its logistics throughout the entire war. In 1941, as the United States was readying the 2.5-ton Deuce and a half truck for mass production, German infantry divisions were still tethered to the walking pace of a horse. This wasn't a tactical choice, it was an economic dictate. Germany could afford to build Tiger tanks, but it couldn't afford the thousands of support trucks needed to keep them fueled. This hybrid army of high-tech tanks and low-tech horses was about to collide with a nation that lived and breathed the internal combustion engine. Wealth isn't just gold, it's human capital. By 1942, the United States could afford to keep millions of its most skilled workers in factories, protected by occupational deferments. Because American industry was so efficient, one worker could produce enough to equip dozens of soldiers. Germany's inefficient, craft-based production required more hands to produce fewer goods. As the war progressed and casualties mounted, the Reich was forced to pull skilled machinists off the factory floor and send them to the Eastern Front. This created a death spiral. Production quality dropped because the experts were dying in the mud, leading to equipment failures that caused even more casualties. As the German workforce thinned, the American arsenal of democracy was just beginning to find its rhythm. Consider the strategic cost of electricity. Producing aluminum, the lifeblood of air power, requires staggering amounts of electrical energy through electrolysis. The United States, wealthy enough to fund massive public works like the Hoover Dam and the TVA, had an almost limitless supply of cheap juice. By 1943, the US was producing over 900,000 tons of aluminum annually. Germany, hampered by a strained coal-based power grid, struggled to hit a third of that. This aluminum ceiling meant that every Luftwaffe bomber built was a direct sacrifice of dozens of fighter planes. The Reich was playing a zero-sum game, while the Americans were playing with a seemingly infinite deck. The gap was so wide that the US could afford luxuries in their weapon designs that the Germans couldn't even dream of. One of the most telling examples of the wealth gap was the American SCR-584 radar. While Germany produced excellent individual radar sets, the SCR-584 used advanced cavity magnetrons, a technology that required high-cost precision manufacturing and rare materials. The US didn't just build a few, they mass-produced them, mounting them on mobile trailers that could automatically aim anti-aircraft guns. This was wealth as a weapon. The Americans could afford to solve tactical problems with expensive automated technology, whereas the Germans had to rely on the human element, bravery and skill, which is a non-renewable resource that eventually runs out. Ultimately, the question of who was richer was answered not in the banks, but in the ruins. In the final analysis, Germany was never richer than the United States, it was merely more desperate. The Reich's apparent strength in 1939 was a facade built on credit, plunder, and the temporary advantage of being the first to mobilize. The United States possessed a latent wealth, a massive underutilized industrial engine that, once ignited, operated on a scale the German economy couldn't even comprehend. By 1945, the disparity was so total that the US was essentially fighting a war of surplus, while Germany fought a war of substitutes. It serves as a haunting reminder that in global conflict, the flashiest parades often hide the shallowest pockets. The real power isn't in the weapon that's shown, but in the factory's ability to replace it 10 times over. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Thank you for watching.